Again, welcome everybody for those who are joining. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining from. Today we're talking about don't stop at the SBOM, take your software supply chain security to the next level. We'll be talking about some of the gaps some software security assessment gaps that are current in the market, along with the very inherent need for a comprehensive risk assessment, a comprehensive software risk assessment, and why the SBOM is just not enough to really get you there. So, introducing myself, my name is Joe Coletta. Like I said, I'm a senior product marketing manager here at ReversingLabs. I've been in the cybersecurity industry for about 10 years now, most of that within the DevSecOps application security space. And I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Deval Shah. So Deval, you want to give an intro to the audience?
Sure. Thanks, Joe. And welcome, everyone. We're excited to have you for the webinar. As Joe mentioned, my name is Deval Shah, and I'm a Senior Director of Product Management at ReversingLabs, where I oversee the development of our software supply chain security platform, which we call Spectra Assure. And for me, I love creating consumer-grade experiences for enterprise products, and I would love to get your feedback throughout the webinar. So that's pretty much everything about me. You can always reach out to me on LinkedIn, Twitter. With that, let's get started, Joe.
Awesome. All right. So just a quick introduction of who we are at ReversingLabs for those who might be unfamiliar. We are the trusted authority in software and file security with solutions that have continually improved over the last 15 years. That's how long we've been going at this business. Our threat repository tracks over 40 billion files of both malware and goodware, and that number continues to grow with our threat research team methodically analyzing and categorizing new instances of malware and goodware on a daily basis. Those 40 billion files puts our repository about 7 times larger than our closest competitor. And what most people don't know about our threat repository is that we provide data to 60 of the leading cybersecurity companies, some of which you very, very well know, trust our data to give feeds to the solutions you might already be using. So we've recently, few things we're particularly proud of as of recently in terms of recent accolades is we've been cited for our premier channel partner program and our technology and alliance partners, along with being recognized by Gartner as a leading software supply chain security provider. And as of most recently, something we're particularly proud of is a contributor to the latest edition, the 2024 edition of the Verizon data breach incident report, which we're particularly proud of. To be a contributor to that data set, which is a standard bearer in the market, we're particularly proud of, and we hang our hat on that. All right. So getting into what we're going to be discussing today. So really what this is going to focus on is understanding the current gaps in existing software security assessments, and particularly the rise of software bill of materials as a standard practice in the industry, and how they present a good launch pad for a comprehensive risk assessment program, but not necessarily the end-all be-all as they unfortunately have been positioned to sort of be. We're really help you guys baseline understanding what good actual safe software looks like, whether you're building software that you're eventually going to be providing to customers, or you're maybe a third-party risk management professional and want to have a better understanding of the software you procure from vendors and understanding if that's actually if that software is safe to use. And then we're going to segue into an introduction of a new comprehensive risk assessment template that we're calling the Spectra Assure SAFE report, and the benefits that affords to both software producers, application security development, and also software buyers, so third-party risk management, security operations, and the CISO suite at large. So again, have a better understanding of baselining what safe software is and what that standard should be for your business going forward. And we'll open up for questions, of course, and then that'll take us home. So moving forward. So some of these statistics I should not have to explain to the folks on the call, the threat landscape of the software supply chain, the threat landscape for software supply chain attacks has seen an alarming rise, both in the frequency and the sophistication of the attacks. I'm sure most of the folks on this call are already very familiar with that. The threat of high-profile software supply chain attacks have become so real and so prevalent that we're actually starting to see more consistent research and data to actually track the fallout and the actual damages, the actual financial damages associated with SSCS attacks specifically. That's that's where we are in this space, where we're able to track this on a consistent basis. So we have a few examples that I wanted to kind of take note of. This Gartner reporting a 742 increase in software supply chain attacks, as well as the costs of stemming from software supply chain attacks rising from almost 200% over the next decade or so, from around $46 billion up to $46 billion in 2023, rising to an estimated $138 billion by 2031. So that's, again, a 200% increase in software and damages associated with software supply chain attacks. So, and that includes things like the detection, incident response, but also any fines that might be associated with those kinds of attacks, to the point where 70% of organizations are actually reevaluating their software supply chain strategy. And like I mentioned, the Verizon DBIR report from earlier this year, they've actually assigned a new risk category within that report, specifically tracking software supply chain breaches stemming from third-party software providers. And that number those attacks have risen 68% since last year's report. So, despite these facts, despite the fact that we're tracking the rise in sophistication of software supply chain breaches, modern enterprises, their security programs consist of an uncoordinated tool sprawl that continually fails to achieve a certain level of certain standard of software supply chain security, and I'll explain what I mean by that right now. So whether again you're a third-party risk professional or an application security professional, you've relied on a series of manual and often cumbersome solutions to evaluate software supply chain risks. And really, the reality is these solutions do not adequately identify the risks and threats of third-party software, both either commercial software. They can't scale with the volume of third-party software that your business is procuring, or they are either hyper-focused on open source software, which is not the end-all be-all of where your software runs. If you think about it this way, the applications that you use in your business are built with open source. That no one can deny that. But think about the fact that the business critical applications you use to run your business, the payroll systems, the video conferencing tools, that's commercial software that your company is investing in to run your business. And that open source may be a component of that, but you as a third-party risk professional, you want to understand the entire risk profile of those applications, not just the open source risk. So kind of understanding the risk, the methods that we've been kind of reliant on as you look at things like vendor security questionnaires, relying on good faith from the vendor to properly disclose the full extent of their security testing regimen. Again, you're taking the vendor on good faith on whether they're providing accurate and truthful attestations to their software security practices. Pen testing has long been a sort of standard in assessing third-party risk, but again, as of late, it's largely been mostly a compliance driver, if we're being completely frank. And pen testing in general are usually hyper-focused in scope. They're scoped very specifically, which in turn omits a large portion of the code base. And again, as most people know, the fees associated with scoping and managing penetration testing is just not scalable on an enterprise application portfolio. So again, the cost associated with scaling pen testing across a global enterprise just is a non-starter. We've seen things like the rise of security rating services are often relevant. Security rating services are used to sort of provide a letter grade or a number grade to a vendor, or to a vendor to kind of understand a benchmark of whether the risk associated with a certain vendor. The problem is that those rely on an external scan of their externally facing infrastructure, things like firewalls, for example. And oftentimes those ratings are not relevant to the software package itself. And again, rely solely on, again, the scans of the vendor's externally facing infrastructure. So yes, you can understand if there's been if they've had data leakages to the dark web, or if they have a firewall. Okay, great. But what does that tell me about the software package I'm ultimately going to be deploying from them on my environment? So there's a huge gap there. And then you have things like sandboxes, which are very resource intensive and can be easily evaded using, malicious techniques, as we've seen with malicious techniques such as time-based payload execution, much like we saw with SolarWinds. And again, and also SBOMs, which are again a fundamental first step, and we'll talk about SBOMs in much more specificity in a bit. Is ultimately just a list of ingredients and don't provide much in the actual risk associated with each individual software, each individual component and artifact that's within that software. It just provides you, again, what's in it, which again, great milestone in transparency. But what do you do with that data? And we'll talk about that in a little bit more. And then finally, I want to talk about traditional AppSec tools. I shouldn't say traditional, but things like static application security testing, dynamic application security testing. So if you're a producer, if your business builds software to then provide to customers, you're probably already very familiar with these tools, and they're absolutely paramount in terms of finding vulnerabilities within your software development lifecycle. But as a software buyer, as someone who's procuring software, those tools require access to source code, which in most cases you're not going to have access to when you're assessing vendor software risk. And then, so again, that's not useful as a software procurement. And if we think about it, going back to sort of the software producer use case, those tools rely solely on common vulnerability enumerations, vulnerability CVEs, which again don't account for the broader scope of software supply chain threats like malware, tampering, exposed secrets, suspicious behaviors. So those can happen within. I mean, we've seen, like, again, with certain software supply chain breaches where we've seen the actual development environment be compromised. A SAST and DAST and SCA are not going to be able to identify that. How do you know that the software you're building hasn't been tampered with by the time it goes in, by the time it makes its way to a customer's environment? And then to add insult to injury, some of you have probably seen the headlines relating to the backlog at the National Vulnerability Database. So the CVE system that we've been accustomed to is kind of lagging with lagging with the sophistication of what businesses need to really assess the safety posture, the security posture of their applications. All right. So on top of the methods that we've been using and the sort of the gaps that those present, we've also seen really the regulatory environment within the software supply chain security space really starting to heat up. Multiple regulatory agencies in both the United States and Europe have committed to curbing software supply chain threats with new guidances, regulations, and as we've seen in the last few months, major penalties. And so for key examples of those, again, the Biden administration's executive order 14028 back in May of 2021. That was kind of like a big landmark regulation in terms of cybersecurity awareness and curbing that risk. And then we've also seen litigation from the the SEC, the Security Exchange Commissions, the Food and Drug Administration in terms of mandating SBOMs for medical devices. And then with the EU, we've seen legislation like the Digital Operational Resilience Act, aka DORA, and also the Cyber Resilience Act. So those landmark legislations have kind of led to have kind of been the, how should I put this, the really kind of underlying the commitment to these regulatory agencies in terms of curbing software supply chain threats specifically. The CISO role has also been elevated in a way that in organizations with it, and with it comes certain security, comes increased scrutiny and personal liability with the rise of these legislations. Again, I mentioned the SEC, and they're citing laws like the Securities Acts of 1933 and the Securities Exchange Act of 1934 to hold CISOs personally accountable for cybersecurity lapses. In the wake of breaches stemming from third-party vendors, organizations that use the product are often cited in headlines, which again causes damages to even their brand and their reputation. So we're in an age where if there is a third-party software breach, not only is the vendor liable for legal action, also the users are liable for legal action may not maybe directly, but certainly in reputation and certainly reputation and brand damage as well. So again, it's a wide scope problem that is opening businesses to liability and punitive damages. All right. So I'm going to take a break for a second and just kind of open the audience up to a poll that we want to kind of just gauge the temperature of the room a little bit. If we can launch that poll. Here we go. So we want to hear from you, just relating to SBOM specifically, because we're going to get into more detail about that in just a moment. Which option best represents your organization's approach to SBOMs? Are you creating and requesting them? Are you only requesting them? So, kind of a bit of a temperature check to see where your head's at in terms of leveraging and requesting SBOMs.
Joe, I have to say the results are fairly encouraging. Everyone is voting in. So we have number 3 and number 4 as kind of leading. So let's see.
You like to see it?
We land.
Let's see, 11, 12. Lucky number 13.
We have 5 votes for we neither create or request SBOMs. That's good. And then the next one is we create but do not request SBOMs. So.
Let's see. All right. So let's see, 42% we neither create nor request SBOMs. We create, but so okay, option number 4 is the clear winner. We create nor request SBOMs. Curious to hear why that might be. Is that something that it's not something that's mandated by your business, or talking to a lot of customers that we've worked with, sometimes they just don't have the processes to adequately intake SBOM. So kind of curious to hear your insights on why that might be. We create but do not request SBOMs was number 2 at 33%. Very interesting. So again, long and short of it is, again, SBOMs as a practice, and actually this is a perfect segue into my next slide. SBOMs as a practice is having its moment in the sun for sure. It's certainly a conversation. It's certainly a hot topic within multiple CISO circles. And SBOM specifically has been brought up quite a bit within those CISO circles as a fundamental first step in closing that software supply chain visibility gap. But again, why SBOM specifically? Why is it that they are constantly in the topic of conversation? Now, truth be told, we as security vendors may have had a role to play in that. But in reality, it's also been a rolling thunder of events that have brought SBOMs into the limelight. The SolarWinds Orion attack is commonly referenced as the match that sort of lit the fire and drew more attention to the topic of software supply chain security, and SBOMs as a common practice. But beyond that, you can point to, it wasn't just SolarWinds, you can point to events like the Colonial Pipeline attack, the CodeCov attacks, and those attacks prompting government agencies such as the White House to draft, Executive Order 14028, back in May of 2021. In fact, Section 4 of that executive order specifically calls out SBOMs, and it calls on CISA and NIST to draft the minimum SBOM standards by which we operate under, to this day. So we've established SBOMs are a requirement for vendors doing business with government agencies, but we're seeing the requirement bleeding into the private sector as well, due to increased need for transparency in commercial software, and just kind of, again, opening that visibility gap into what actually goes into the software that we use and build. In fact, Gartner actually reported that 60% of organizations procuring software will mandate a software bill of materials within their license and support agreement. So this is actually being written into the contract agreement between software consumers and producers. But again, at the end of the day, SBOMs are just a starting point. A list of ingredients is a good place to start, but so many organizations lack the tools to efficiently parse through the data to unearth any meaningful risk insights. For again, many SCA vendors that provide SBOM generation, that data those risks are hyper-focused on open source vulnerabilities, which is only, again, a small portion of the overall software supply chain landscape. Again, what about commercial and proprietary? What about commercial and proprietary components? What about artifacts that aren't even written into the build manifest by the time the software package goes into production? again, and what about what other threats beyond just vulnerabilities? Things again, like I mentioned, malware, tampering, secrets leakage, um, proper hardening techniques, and then Deval will actually go into those in more detail. You know, how do you have the assurance that the components with listed in your software provide that full risk picture? Um, so that's again a glaring visibility gap. That's a glaring visibility gap in terms of how those individual components map to specific software supply chain threat vectors. So with that in mind, we've reached a crossroads in the industry where a comprehensive software security assessment is sorely needed, one that identifies a broader range of threat categories beyond just vulnerabilities and beyond just a list of ingredients, regardless of whether you're producing software or you're procuring software. You need to be able to answer the fundamental question: is the software that I am deploying to my customers and to my environment ultimately safe to use? Which again prompts us to what we're the sort of the star of our show is introducing what we're dubbing the safe report, introducing the safe report, which Deval, I'll let you take it away to kind of explain what we're doing with this new software security standard.
Thank you very much, Joe. So ReversingLabs' new Spectra Assure SAFE report, it stands for Software Assurance Foundational Evaluation. And this report sharpens the insights for supply chain risk assessments and adds powerful controls to the software you build or you buy. So moving on to the next slide, we see that SAFE represents a significant leap in software supply chain security. And here's what makes SAFE different from the SBOMs, right? So it combines the component listing of an SBOM with the comprehensive risk and threat assessment that Joe was mentioning. And SAFE also provides critical visibility for all the different stakeholders in the software supply chain, all the way from people producing software to people consuming software, including development teams, security teams, cybersecurity leaders, and risk managers. And then instead of just listing a list of ingredients, SAFE report builds on a complete picture of security risk, allowing organizations to find and address hidden threats effectively. Moving on to the next slide. And one of the things that I always found extremely useful is kind of using an example to better understand the concepts. And I recently visited my parents, and I kind of baked cupcake for the kind of anniversary. So this example is very fresh in my mind. But just imagine you're planning to bake some cupcakes, right? So you create a grocery list with all the necessary ingredients that you would need, right? So I would imagine you need flour, sugar, milk, eggs, butter, chocolate, and baking soda. And so what that does, the ingredient list is, the list is helpful because it gives you a clear view of everything that you need to buy, and you know exactly what ingredients are required to make the cupcakes. But that's pretty much where it ends, right? So the list doesn't tell you anything about the quality, safety, or the nutritional value of those items. Next slide, please. Now let's assume you decide to kind of sell your cupcakes to your neighbors, to people in your apartment building, and so on and so forth. And so if you're trying to do that, you would want to come up with the ingredient list, which will be based on your grocery list, right? So now the ingredient list ensures that you have all the ingredients listed so people can read kind of what's going into your cupcake. But it doesn't inform them kind of if the milk was fresh, if the chocolate contains any harmful additives, or if the flour was properly stored, right? So you're left to assume everything on the list is safe and of good quality. And so there's always this confusion in mind of consumer is, I know, what goes inside, but is it to the dietary standards or the quality that I expect from the specific product? So that's where we have the differentiation in terms of the SAFE report. Next slide, please. And the easiest way to kind of think about SAFE is kind of, SAFE would be more of a nutrition label. So think of it as SAFE as your detailed nutrition label that you find on your packaged cupcake, but with the added layer of safety inspection. And so what that does is this label not only lists all the ingredients similar to your SBOM, but also provides essential information in terms of nutritional content, right? So how much calories, fats, sugar, protein, and much more. And additionally, it also includes safety checks. So was the milk fresh? Was it free from contamination? Is the chocolate free from harmful chemicals? Is the milk within expiry date? Everything that I need to make sure before I'm buying the product that it's safe for me and my family. And the benefit that we get is with this detailed information, you can make informed decisions, right? So you know not just what's in the cupcake, but also whether it's healthy, safe, and meets your dietary needs. And if any of the ingredients were to fail any secure safety check, you're alerted to it before it ends up in your recipe, protecting you from the potential health risk. Now, let's take it back in terms of the software security landscape, right? So when we think about SBOM, which is, we would say in our example, similar to ingredient list, the SBOM gives you a list of all the components in the piece of software. And it's crucial for understanding what's inside, just like the grocery list helps you see what's inside the cupcake. But again, that's pretty much where it stops. So when we think about kind of the ReversingLabs SAFE report, it goes beyond the list by analyzing each component for vulnerabilities, malicious code, potential tampering, and other risks. So it's like the nutritional label that ensures that everything in a cupcake is safe, healthy, and suitable for consumption. And so this example highlights while an SBOM provides the necessary transparency about what's inside the software, the SAFE ensures the components are safe, secure, and preventing any hidden risk or compromising your final product and your organizational security. Next slide, please. So as we just saw, SBOMs are definitely essential, right? So SBOMs are foundational tools, and they help list the ingredients, the components of the software. However, they are lacking kind of providing end-to-end kind of the security visibility, right? So they are insufficient for comprehensive security, and they provide limited value in assessing true software supply chain risks. And that's where what we call is kind of beyond SBOM, which is our Spectra Assure SAFE report. And again, with SAFE report as well, you get a list of comprehensive ingredients that you would get in SBOM, but with the added benefit of getting malware detection, tampering identification, secrets management, vulnerability analysis, software hardening checks, and license management. And so what it does, it gives you a 360-degree view of all the different attack vectors that can affect your software supply chain security. And we believe that the comprehensive approach transforms the SBOM into a comprehensive report and addresses a broader range of security challenges. So let's get on to the use cases that we have on the next slide, where we compare the use cases for SBOM versus the use cases for our Spectra Assure SAFE report. And so with the SBOM, you can definitely check for presence of components. So if I want to see, if my software has log4j, SBOM will definitely help you do that. But some of the additional benefits that you get to the SAFE report, we have quite a few listed, so I'll pick the ones that are most important. Is you get additional insights in terms of prevention of malware deployment, stopping any software supply chain attacks, and detecting tampering and any unauthorized changes. So the SAFE report covers far more use cases than the SBOM, providing critical insights needed to protect against the supply chain threats. That's everything from me from now. Joe, hand it over to you. Joe, you're muted.
Sorry about that. It was bound to happen. Of course, it's going to be me. So one more audience poll. Again, just making sure everybody's awake. Does your business associate software supply chain assessments with any of these common industry certifications? And again, curious to hear if SBOMs are fulfilling those requirements for you folks. So if you have any insights you want to share in the chat, please by all means do so. But in the meantime, let's see what the poll has to say. So we've got give it a few more.
Interesting that 27,001 is the one in the lead. I didn't expect that.
Yeah, above PCI, above GDPR. Yeah, that is very interesting. Let's see.
Okay.
All right.
Last few seconds, if anyone wants to get the votes in. We have one for DORA as well. So I guess we have folks from EU or with EU restrictions. So.
Right. SOC 2 and ISO's 27001 far and away the leader here. So yeah, that is surprising to see. I'm surprised. I was expecting more PCI being a leader, but again, seeing that EU DORA is taking prevalence shouldn't be surprising, because that was a very, that will have global ramifications, I'm sure. All right. Moving forward. So at this point, I'm going to hand it back to Deval. I'm going to stop sharing for a bit. And Deval, if you want to kind of showcase, kind of give us a video tour of the SAFE report and the insights it shares, I'll hand it to you right now. So let me just stop sharing and let you take it away.
Okay, so you should be seeing the Spectra Assure report right now.
Yep,
Joe, is
you are
that
live.
okay? Got it. Okay, and so a demo is always kind of a better description to kind of show things how are in action. And so what I have in front of you is a Spectra Assure product, and I've taken a very popular software application, which I'll call it malicious application due to kind of everything that we find within the product, and I've scanned it through Spectra Assure, and what you're seeing in front of you is the SAFE report. So I'll go to different aspects of the SAFE report and show how it can help you kind of detect your software supply chain risks and help address them effectively to kind of you not being kind of the company that comes in to highlight all for the all wrong reasons. And one thing that always stuck with me was there are only two kind of companies: the one that knows that I've been hacked, or the other ones that don't know they have been hacked. Right? So you don't want to be in the second part. You want to be the ones that kind of it's more on the safer side. So let's get on to kind of understanding what the SAFE report includes, right? So on the left-hand side, we provide an overall summary in terms of after we run the scan, what's the assessment, right? Whether it's pass and green for you to kind of distribute it to your customers, within the organization, or it's red and kind of fail, right? So over here, we can pretty much see that the scan has failed. And if you look at the size of the package, it was roughly 100 megs, and the engine took 22 seconds, right? So that's one of the things that we're extremely proud of, is that the engine is extremely fast and efficient in terms of kind of scanning applications. We've seen customers scan 10 gigs worth of file with, it finishes within a minute or two. So it's extremely efficient in terms of scanning your files quickly so that your team doesn't have to wait. And so on the right-hand side, you see kind of the 4 boxes that highlight some of the supply chain risks that we've seen as part of the scan. So we've seen definitely a P0 deployment risk. So this is something serious enough that you or your team should be taking into account. And we also highlight kind of the 3 malicious components that were found. So these would be instances of malware that were found. As you can see, we've ran through close to 258 policies that kind of include the different aspects of supply chain attacks. And we found issues with 39 of those policies. And so we are highlighting those below. And then the next 2 boxes include kind of the active vulnerabilities that we have that we observed within the package. And then any kind of malware that we found within your package. So the top row gives a very quick kind of in a glancing view in terms of what's wrong within your package. The next row that we have are the comprehensive risk categories of what we call SAFE assessment. We focus on kind of 3 categories: compliance, security, and threats. And within compliance, we check for different kind of license violations that comply with your organization's risk tolerance, any kind of secrets that we might find within your packages. So one thing that we look for is, and we are different from SAST and SCA tool, is we look for kind of, end-to-end kind of your CI/CD pipeline. So any kind of secrets that might happen throughout your pipeline that might be embedded within your binary, we will be able to flag those. And so that's very crucial. If you look, many of the recent supply chain attacks, many of the attacks happen outside of the source code and more into the kind of CI/CD pipeline vulnerabilities. We also focus on kind of, showing you kind of the CVEs or the vulnerabilities and kind of any kind of software hardening. And so this is something that's unique to a platform, is we go deeper into the layers and tell you kind of, any kind of compiler changes, platform changes, language changes that you might want to enable that might even harden the software security for your products. And then we also look for kind of any kind of signs of tampering and malware. And so when I look at tampering, we see that again, there are 3 revoked certificates detected and 3 instances of malware found in your package. Right below that, what we want to do is, given that we found everything, we want to help our customers, kind of, have sizable chunks to kind of fix the issues and kind of go through the maturity level over time. So this has been extremely popular with our customers, wherein again, they'll come over here and be like, okay, I can see I have that many issues. how can I get to level 1 kind of, maturity? And so if I were to fix those 3 malware detected, I'll get to kind of the level 1 maturity and kind of take care of the most serious of the software supply chain risk within my package. And then if I were to kind of get to level 2, I have one CV that needs to be patched, and then so on and so forth, right? So you essentially start from the left and start having more mature software security over time. And then over here, we kind of highlight across all the kind of different risk categories that we have. What are the topmost 5 important software quality issues? So if your team is truly in crunch time and they're trying to launch something, this is where they should be focusing on and kind of getting it fixed and kind of prioritizing how to fix the rest of the issues in the meantime. And then we also have a radar chart, which should be extremely useful for your security teams, your management teams, and kind of understanding kind of the landscape of where most of the issues are, whether it's P1, P2, P3, and so kind of taking appropriate decisions based on this information. I'm really proud of the work that our engineering team has done in terms of kind of differentiating and overlaying some of the advanced threat detection information that we have at ReversingLabs with the vulnerability detection. So over here, what you see is essentially the CVEs or the vulnerabilities that we found within the package, but we try to add some additional metadata in terms of whether the CVE has an exploit, whether the CVE has been exploited by a malware, or the CVE has a patch mandated notification by a government organization like CISA. So we layer in that information, and we provide that context such that if you were to prioritize what to fix, you'd want to kind of definitely focus on kind of the patch mandated. If you want to sell to the government or kind of want to make sure everything is secure as per government guidelines, this is definitely something that you want to fix. But at the same time, based on looking at that extensive kind of customer base and kind of the threats that we evaluate, as Joe was mentioning earlier, we do have deep insights into kind of the CVs being exploited and malware and whether the exploit exists. And so that's something that you would want to also prioritize before kind of moving on to CV discovered. The best case use is, you want to fix CVs on the left as well, so it doesn't progress to the right. But, as we understand, there's always a compromise to be had. And so we want to make sure we provide everything that's needed to achieve organizations' risk tolerance policy. Next, we have instances of malware. So that's something that's unique to ReversingLabs, is we look for malware instances within your software package and kind of flag those as well. So that kind of, we can have a lot more details in terms of what's needed to kind of fix those. And at the bottom, we have our kind of 6 different assessment evaluations. So we look for license violations, secrets, vulnerabilities, any kind of software hardening, right? So any kind of vulnerability mitigations, execution hijacking concerns, any kind of software tampering, right? So if we've had any revoked certificates detected, partially signed components, that's something that can eventually be used for a software supply chain attack. And definitely at the malware, So this is what we call is a high-level overview of the SAFE report. I'll quickly just go over some of the quick components. And again, this is our software bill of materials. So the one thing to keep in mind is, ReversingLabs Spectra Assure relies on binary analysis. And so how that differentiates from SAST and SCA tool is we can recursively unpack all the different components. So if you have dependency on kind of third-party software or kind of SCA, any kind of open source software, we can recursively unpack that proprietary software as well to kind of tell you all the extensive libraries that might be included. So for example, if you're including some sort of logging library or some sort of error messaging library that's proprietary, we can kind of unpack and kind of show you the dependencies that your SC and SAS tool would have a lot more problems kind of doing that. So we have our components and we have a dependency listed. And then in terms of issues, one thing I do want to highlight is, we try to kind of minimize the noise across the vulnerabilities. So one of the things that you can definitely do is, as a developer, I can be like, hey, across the entire binary, I'm only responsible for kind of this specific file path. And so what that does is in the software, you can be like, okay, you can silo it by the parts of the software that you're responsible for and kind of quickly look into addressing those. And so we provide you a detailed description in terms of kind of why we think the issue exists, what would be estimate to fix, and what would be the relevant next steps. And then for vulnerabilities, as I quickly mentioned earlier, you can look for kind of different tags. So, if I were to prioritize, I would be like, show me all the vulnerabilities that have a patch mandate and then also have a fix available. So that's something that I can focus on fixing first before moving on to some of the other vulnerabilities. And the last two features I want to highlight as part of the audit functionality that's unique to ReversingLabs is, we can look at the behaviors that your software package is exhibiting, either the ones that you're producing or the ones that you purchase to be deployed within the organization. And one of my favorite use cases is to go over here and look for behaviors that might correspond to kind of stealing behavior. So, for example, if your software is kind of like a Zoom-like application, if it might require access to a webcam, but if you're using like a Notepad application or like a ID application, there's no reason that why it should be requiring access to like a webcam, right? So over here, we'll flag instances like, it might monitor your keystrokes, retrieves text from clipboard, requires access to webcam, right? So, and that's something that our customers have shared with us, that they were actually surprised to find that the application was requesting access to all these details that shouldn't have in the first place. And they were able to take the safe report, share it with the vendor, and get it fixed before they deployed within the organization and reduce their supply chain risk. And then we also kind of show you all the kind of networking things that we found, so you can quickly evaluate kind of what's a allow list or deny list for your software. And then we also provide a high level overview in terms of the 360-degree view of your software package. I know I've gone through tons of kind of details within the software assurance, kind of the safe report that we have, but I'll hand it over to Joe. It's all over for you now.
Thank you, Deval. All right, we're at the point where we want to bring it home. So I want to touch on real quick and sort of the twilight of our presentation here today is, hey Joe, hey Deval, love what you're talking about. How do I operationalize this? How do I optimize this within my workflow? And we're happy to answer that in the few minutes we have left. But we've broken this out into two segments. Again, one from a producer perspective, those that are actually building and selling software to customers, and then we'll touch upon what to do and how to kind of optimize and operationalize a safe report within a third-party risk assessment, so a procurement type scenario. So again, as Deval mentioned, the safe report is ultimately the output of our Spectra Assure complex binary analysis. So with that, you're able to integrate the complex binary analysis throughout your CI/CD pipeline and generate the safe report at increasingly at different stages within that CI/CD pipeline. And the safe report can be adjusted in a way where the results you get from each assessment is adjusted to kind of reflect increasingly strict levels of scrutiny as your binary makes it from the build stage to the testing stage, testing or staging, and then ultimately culminating in sort of a final build exam just prior to production. So again, as your binary makes its way again throughout the software development pipeline, making it closer to production, you want to make sure that you have that increasingly strict level of assessment to make sure that it is ready to go live in a production environment. We've established that level of trust that our customers that relies upon us to deploy it within their environment. So again, that provides a level of feedback for your development team. It provides a level of feedback from your AppSec team. And it kind of, again, provides a benchmark as to where you need to improve in order to reach that extra level of maturity, to reach that extra level of risk assessment, kind of how we illustrate that within our safe level system. So within a third-party risk management sort of scenario where you're in a position where you may be a third-party risk management professional, you're a procurement professional, a cyber risk management professional, and you want to assess the security posture of any vendor or commercial application that you're onboarding. The safe report provides that mechanism to take ownership of third-party software risk pretty much throughout the entire software consumption lifecycle, from acquisition to deployment, maintaining software that's already been deployed, and monitoring your existing software for any new threats that might be disclosed. So with every vendor onboarding, cyber risk professionals with the SAFE report can make informed risk decisions by independently assessing third-party software without relying on the good faith gestures on the part of the vendor, what you would get from like a questionnaire or some other type of method. Um, and because of this, they can be generated across multiple vendors. Because you have that level of freedom to assess the software binary, you don't need access to source code. You can scale this across multiple vendors to establish a concrete go, no-go decision criteria for new vendor onboardings. And that can also be applied to not only net new vendors, but also for new software patches, new versions, or new releases that the vendor might release. Um, and this streamlines the vendor onboarding process immensely. So, that risk assessment is not a hang up for what the software is meant to um, meet in terms of the needs of the business. The SAFE report also not to be ignored. The SAFE report also comes with the built-in mechanisms for TPRM, vendor application security testing, GRC, AppSec teams, or procurement teams, to comment that a commercial software package is within an acceptable risk range, even if the software does not meet internal security or compliance policies. Let's say, for example, that uh, the business need outweighs the level of risk that is being identified. This at least provides an internal audit record and allows third-party, risk professionals to add notes to describe the business justification for accepting a particular software package. So you have that level of assurance that there is a written record of an accepted risk, and work cross-functionally across different roles. For example, your SOC team, if they need to add some sort of mitigating control or monitoring mechanism to make sure to monitor that risk vector to make sure that it's being monitored effectively. And lastly, sharing the SAFE report with vendors directly helps to bring awareness to the most imminent security issues, embedded in any third-party commercial package, and expedite remediation action plan. So, for example, if you come across a scenario where you perform a risk assessment, you generate a SAFE report, and you see a threat or risk that is beyond acceptable criteria, you can share that feedback with the vendor directly to work out a remediation action plan in an expedited manner. So that removes a lot of the ambiguity that you might see if a vendor were to do their own risk assessment versus if you were to do your own. You're essentially removing that ambiguity, so you're looking at the same data and able to work together to kind of to come to an agreed remediation action plan. And this also, again, so what I described earlier is kind of sort of within the acquisition, the deployment, and the maintenance, maintaining existing software that's been deployed. Let's also talk about monitoring software that's already deployed in your environment as well, because as we know, the software supply chain threat landscape changes on an almost daily basis. So you want to have an understanding of if there is a new log4j, if there is a new XZ, that you want to be able to answer that fundamental question of, am I exposed? Well, the SAFE report, containing not only just being this comprehensive software risk assessment, also has a queryable SBOM within which you can actually query a specific software component to see, again, if there's that level of exposure that is relevant to your business. And again, if that's something that you need to bring awareness to the vendor to again coordinate that remediation action plan, you can share the SAFE report directly with that vendor, again through a time gated and secure shareable link. Again, so you have that same pane of glass and you're understanding the same data within that same window. So again, there's no ambiguity, there's no confusion. All right. All right. So ultimately, again, this is the final slide just to bring it home again. We've talked about the SAFE standard the SAFE report in terms of how it can be utilized, how it can be applied within your environment. Really, the benefits that this provides for software producers is, for those that building software, is that it provides you a mechanism to showcase good security hygiene to regulators, to your customers, to really build that level of transparency and trust that you need to showcase as a software provider. And it provides a benchmark by which to measure the improving maturity of your software security practices. So we talked about safe levels as sort of a mechanisms by which to measure that. That provides tangible evidence that your team is actually assessing and remediating risks that are associated with those, increasingly strict safe levels. So if you're able to showcase that you were a safe level 5 security provider, or excuse me, software provider, that'll benefit you in leaps and bounds in terms of, again, earning that trust and reliability for compliance needs and for customer acquisition as well. And on the flip side, for enterprise buyers, again, you want that level of transparency. You want to be able to independently assess software on your own accord to understand, is the software that I'm buying from this vendor actually safe to use? So the Safe Report actually provides that mechanism to make that assessment. And again, like I said, providing a clear go, no-go criteria to apply to any mission critical vendors that are accountable for your business. And again, answering that fundamental question: if there is a new Log4j, if there is a new XE, am I exposed in the event of a 0-day scenario? That level of rapid response that the Safe Report provides is critical for a third-party risk management use case. So that's all we have. So we want to open it up for any questions that might be in the chat. Let's see. It looks like we actually have a handful in the chat menu. Let's see.
Joe, answered the most in the chat. If you want to get into the
Okay.
Q&A, if you received any, Joanna?
Sure. Oh, yes. Looks like you had some correspondence with Saray. Question coming in, actually. When would be when would be the best time to request a safe report from a vendor during the procurement process? Deval, do you want to take a swing at that, and maybe I can add some color?
Sure, 100%. And the one guiding principle that I have is, security always seems excessive till it's not, right? So the one thing that you want to keep in mind is, go with the assumption that the software supply chain is compromised, even for the biggest providers, and kind of, do your due diligence before kind of, decide to purchase the software. So in terms of kind of, some of the process that we've seen from procurement is, they ask for kind of the ISO SOC 2 certifications or PCI certifications as relevant. What we are asking folks to also ask for that safe level certifications, right? Before you make that decision. If you have multiple vendors, look for the security posture, look for the kind of, the security sanity before you decide on what you want to be purchasing and implementing within your organization, because the weakness in the vendor's software can actually get you exposed to software supply chain attacks. So that'll be my kind of, my recommendation. And one thing I always try to keep in mind is, in God we trust, but everything else we monitor and secure, right? So, no trust, but verify. So.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, the safe level mechanism is a great sort of turnkey approach to assess to kind of gauge the security maturity and risk posture of multiple vendors at one time. If you're trying to fit a business need and you have one vendor that is a safe level 2 versus a safe level 4, it makes that decision, that go no go criteria, that much more explicit, much more obvious. Right.
And what we've seen is, we've seen some of the bigger financial organizations, health organizations, have their vendor move from level 1 to level 2 to level 3, right? So they've been kind of, proactively purchasing Spectra Assure, scanning all the different software within they have, sharing the report with the vendor, and kind of, making them kind of, have that maturity level. So.
Yeah. Question incoming in from Robert. It looks like your products can be used for evaluating, finding security risks in software that is built in-house and for purchased third-party software. Is that correct? That is absolutely correct, Robert. Deval, I didn't know if you wanted to provide any color, but
so Robert,
yeah, clear.
One of the things that differentiates us from other SAST and SCA tool is we don't require access to the source code, right? As long as you have access to the binary, the container, the image, we can recursively unpack that. And the beauty of that is it can be used for both producing software. So as Joe was showing, across your CI/CD pipeline, you can have multiple insertion points to kind of validate the security of a software. Or if you're purchasing any third-party software, you can run it through Spectra Assure. We'll be automatically be able to generate the SBOM for you. We'll be able to kind of provide the end-to-end kind of the security posture for that software. And so the next time the big incident happens, like Log4j or Polyfill or XZ, you can use Spectra Assure to scan everything that's deployed within the organization and search for that components and not wait for the vendor to respond. So
Exactly. Sure. We might have time for one more. Let's see. We're already doing SaaS-DAST SCA. I mean, we kind of already touched upon this. We're already doing SaaS-DAST and SCA. How is SAFE going above and beyond what I'm already doing? I mean, I have my
I can
take on
take
this.
that part. And
Sure.
one of the common occurrence that we've seen across many of our customers is they're using different tools for different purposes. SAST and SCA are good in kind of helping you kind of find issues in your source code. But many times, you don't have visibility into the source code, right? If you, let's say, having dependency on Microsoft libraries or, Twitter libraries or any kind of the third-party libraries where you don't have access to source code, they might be including even additional kind of libraries, including that. And so what's the beauty of Spectra Assure is we don't need access to the source code. All we need is access to the binary. We can recursively unpack all the dependencies and give you a complete end-to-end kind of SBOM, right? So that's the benefit that you get on kind of having more of a layered approach for security. And what we've shown is you get the SBOM and some of the other tools, you get the SBOM and additional benefits with Spectra Assure. So I would highly recommend to kind of we have free trial. Just go sign up for Spectra Assure. Upload your binary, see what the safe report tells you, and compare it with and kind of make your decision whether it's kind of satisfies the use case or not.
Right. Awesome. I think that's about all the time we have. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us today. Again, what we're trying to advocate here is, again, a new, eventually a new standard of how software security risk is assessed, in a comprehensive manner, one that doesn't just kind of focus on vulnerabilities, but focus on an entire scope of software supply chain threats. So we do have I just want to wrap it up with some other content that we have coming down the pike. On September 11th, you can hear from our colleagues and co-authors of our latest SSCS for Dummies e-guide. They will provide a great overview of some of the key elements from our ebook that we just published. More SBOM insights. Feel free to check out this recent GRC webinar from our colleague Charlie Jones, who's a wizard, by the way. Everything that he presents is valuable. And I love the title, Presenting an SBOM FBOM. I don't know who wrote that up, but give him a raise. We also have content on our website, a new RL white paper that we just published going beyond the SBOM that you can find that on our solutions page. Feel free to check that out. It'll kind of cover a lot of the topics we discussed in this webinar. And links for all these are in the chat and will be included in your follow-up email. So we encourage you to give those a read. But with that said, thank you all again. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.